So, further to my post about the Q test, we may as well talk about the little Mojo. And so I bought a Mojo before I bought the Q test, and it's kind of why I bought the Q test, because I was so impressed with this little device. So for specs, as far as what it will take, what it will accept as an input, and what it puts out, it's pretty much the same as the Q test. So you got a really high resolution input acceptability and highly resolved music coming out. And for the most part, they sound pretty much the same. But this is a fraction of the price. The Poly's attached to this right now, but we'll talk about that in a second. So for value for money, I think this thing is absolutely remarkable. Yes, I was disappointed with the Q test, really based on the fact that it is expensive and it is supposed to be, it has more capable. Well, I think the functionality of the Q test is slightly better than this. You've actually got full-sized inputs and outputs, which is really useful. So there's actually, I'll just take the Poly off for a second. I'll just squeeze it off my hand. So you've got a regular optical input there, and then you've got the micro USB digital input, and this 3.5mm coax input, which is rather hysterical because I haven't found a single cable that I can use it on. I've toyed with the idea of making one up, but yeah, save that for another occasion. So a bit limited for how you use this and what cables you can use with it. The micro USB, yeah, there are a few decent quality USB cables out there that will suffice. And you've got the 3.5 jack out as well. Not sure why they bothered to give you two sets of headphone outs, but why not? I've already mentioned the buttons. They look cool, but actually in the end they're just a gimmick. They actually don't really add to the listening experience. But yeah, for the money, it's absolutely splendid. It really delivers. Now I've mentioned this. I've mentioned how it sounds by comparison to a few other DACs, and it has got a dry and analytical flavour to it. But for essentially a budget device, I can't think of anything better. And certainly, I would prefer this over any internal DAC from a telephone or from a computer or what have you. And I use this through a computer, so I used a USB input, and I actually had this hooked up to one of our main systems, which is not really what it was designed for. It's designed as a portable, high quality DAC for your phone, basically. I've never used it like that. The battery is pretty bad. I had to replace the battery on the first one of these that we got. Unless you're discharging it and recharging it on a regular basis, it starts to degrade pretty quickly. So certainly in a position where I had it, where it was sort of a fairly permanent item in a home system, being plugged in all the time, it would just destroy the battery, and then it would be no good for taking on portable journeys. So that's definitely something to be aware of. Yeah, then there's the Poly. So the Poly fits onto that, and so that's got Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capabilities. So you can stream music to it. So again, potentially you can have this chucked in your pocket somewhere, and you can be Bluetoothing to from your phone or streaming. The Wi-Fi is pretty. It's not that friendly to use. You've got to be on the same. You have to have an internet connection for this to work. I think I can't remember how it goes, but essentially it wasn't. It didn't work out conveniently for us. Using the Bluetooth, sure, why not? Fine, but then you're sort of reducing your listening enjoyment. Really, it's a handy function for when it is handy and for when you're on the road. But I would rather streaming through the Wi-Fi or physically connected. Yeah, and I think just a sort of a word around USB connections. To be honest, it's taken me a while to figure out that USB is pretty flawed by comparison to your standard coaxial connection. Certainly sonically it seems to be. I don't know why technically that's the case. I found out recently that I've always struggled with music stored on the computer. It's something that I've done since since digital music was available. It's always been stored on the computer and played from a computer. And I tried various laptops and desktops and high-end USB cables and different DACs with USB inputs. And again, this is another party piece of the Chord products, is that the USB input again will accept highly resolved music. But in the end, I found out that when I moved over to a server and a coax connection, that everything just became right. Everything just sounded correct. And it was something that I really struggled with for a long time. I couldn't really work out why that digital music coming from that computer was so flawed by comparison to a record or a CD. And so that's been quite the epiphany for me, and we'll talk about that at some point. The servers that we use at the moment are pretty inexpensive. They're the Blue Sound servers, but I like them very much. I like how they work, and I like the functionality of them. One day I'll maybe upgrade to something a bit more spendy, but for now they're doing a great job, and certainly yards apart from having stored music on a computer. So again, that's why the USB, why the Chord Q test and the Mojo are less often used these days, because playing music through a USB connection, unless it's through a telephone, just doesn't really happen very often. But anyway, so like I said, for the money, I think it's an absolutely amazing little device, and we'll hang on to them for a bit longer and use them until we don't use them, and then it'll be time to move them on and go in search of the next greatest thing.